Hello YouTube. I want to tell you some of the ways that UPS breaks your stuff. I used to work in the UPS warehouse, and here's some of the ways that we would routinely break people's stuff. Packages would get thrown in the haste to get them loaded because they were pushing 300 packages per hour production rates. They wanted you to load at least 300 an hour minimum to satisfy the corporate jerks who ran everything. That was corporate who was pushing those numbers. And the full-time and part-time supervisors that were above the hourly workers who were doing most of the work were the ones who made these demands of the workers and told them to do this. They would throw the packages to get them up onto the walls inside the truck. The walls were built vertically out of packages all over the truck ceiling. Packages were dropped from as high as 3 stories from the conveyor system down on the cement. They were pulled through crevices in the conveyor belts down to where the gearboxes were and grinded down in those spaces underneath diverters and between gears and rolling pins. Mechanical equipment with thousands of pounds of force acting on the packages. Larger packages would be sent down the conveyor system and crush smaller packages between them. Bleach and other chemicals would spill out of other customers' packages onto other customers' stuff, dissolving packages and their contents. People would walk on the packages because the floor in the trucks would be so overwhelmed with volume because they're pushing it at an insane rate down the feed slides into the trailers. They'd have to climb over them to get out of the trucks at break time when they're overwhelmed. 6-7 feet deep, these mountains inside the feeds would get, and it'd be pouring off the slides and blocking your ability to walk and exit your truck, especially on the outbound. TVs would get thrown, dropped, and kicked. All sorts of packages would get thrown, dropped, and kicked. Things would get dropped off the trains. The truck roofs would have holes in them. There'd be bad weather. Water would be pouring through the ceiling sometimes onto people's packages, their parcels, letters, everything, you name it. The company wasn't good about maintaining the fleet. Things got broken all the time. And we'd have broken glass pouring out of packages from people, dropping, kicking, and crushing them, or customers just poorly packing them. The contents of packages would spill out in the conveyor system after packages were destroyed or damaged completely, to the point that the ends of the boxes would be burst and things would just be spilling out everywhere. And it'd be flowing out at the sort aisle, it'd be falling out in the trailers, it'd be falling out coming down the pins. Customers just would not believe the stuff that happened. We had to bring in our own slide wax to lubricate the slides because the company was not good about keeping up with supplies. I'd have to buy furniture polish to prevent the packages from jamming up on the slide and crushing each other. I'm not even joking. Furniture polish, like the stuff with the yellow lid, Great Value, or Pledge. Pledge was the big one. That was everybody's go-to favorite, but there were a couple of knockoff brands too. Yeah. And people would stand, walk, and sit on the UPS packages at the warehouse. The employees would, because they're simply overwhelmed by the sheer volume of crap that's coming down. The company didn't provide any chairs or seating throughout the building except for in the break room, which was, for many people, between 500 and 700 feet away from their work areas. There was only one break room in the hub, and you basically had to walk the length of 2 football fields to get to it. And that's not an exaggeration. It really sucked. That was the only place with AC or snacks or any seating, and the only seating they had in there was bar stools. And there was only about 10 seats in a building that has 500 people. Aside from that, if you wanted to have seating, you'd have to sit outside. And there were maybe 6 picnic tables, which still wasn't enough to accommodate everybody. So most people just sit down on the conveyor belts when they stopped for their 10-minute break. Yes, you heard me right, 10 minutes. And they would eat and drink any snacks or provisions that they brought with them and try to rest during that 10 minutes, because 10 minutes was all you'd get. Being driven so hard, some of the employees would get angry, and they would take their anger out on the packages at the hub. And that's not even to mention the employees that would come in with nefarious intentions, who were tearing mail open to steal the contents of those packages. There were some criminals that would get jobs at the company. They had a really serious issue with security because the company wasn't paying people shit. It probably would have been that way anyway, even if they were paying people decently, but what they were paying people at the UPS warehouse was slave wages. You were lucky to leave there after 5 days of work with between 120 and 150 a week for 20 hours of work, because they would steal people's wages off their checks. So people would get angry, and they would take their vengeance by getting pissed off and throwing people's stuff around, throwing the boxes, stacking them carelessly without consideration for, well, hey, that package in the wall is going to collapse right there. We should really be careful not to put that package there. And many times people would stack packages that were much lighter than heavy packages in just extreme haste to try to build a wall as quickly as possible, because the amount of shit that's coming down is just absolutely biblical. That's not even an exaggeration. They cluster, you inside those trucks, and you're sitting there like, what am I gonna do? There's so much stuff coming down. Oh my God. That is really what they do, and the stuff pours down off the conveyor system and the pins onto the floor. It forms a mountain next to your rollers in the outbound, especially. And people wig out, they freak out, they get really pissed off, and some people just don't care, and they'll just let it back up, and then the supervisors have to send them help. But stuff gets crushed routinely, gets dropped, it gets thrown, it falls, like I said. And you shouldn't send anything you care about through UPS, especially electronics, like televisions. Nope. Either use FedEx or use the postal service, but don't use UPS to ship anything sensitive like electronics, because they're going to take that box and they're going to beat the hell out of it. That's the truth. I kid you not. I have seen it happen. I have seen dozens of shattered flat screen TVs. I've seen people's stuff pouring out of the boxes because the boxes are crushed, because the system is absolutely getting overwhelmed by the sheer amount of force of packages, and volume being forced through the conveyor system. And they don't have the staffing on the outbound to support loading that stuff as fast as it's being sent. They'll put 2 and 3 people in a truck unloading on the receiving side that's bringing volume to the building from other hubs, and then they'll have one guy inside each one of those outbound loads and one part-time supervisor on the PD to run those areas. And then people call in, or people are late, or people get fired, or they get sick, and you end up with the area running 1 or 2 people short, sometimes more, sometimes it's 3 people short. And that just completely screws the whole night when you have a shortage of staffing. A lot more stuff gets broken, and customers are going to lose their stuff. That's why, they had an overgoods area, because piles and piles and piles of broken stuff would be brought over to overgoods. It'd just be absolutely horrific. So much stuff was broken. Think small mountains, like several 100 pounds of stuff a night, just in pieces. Torn boxes, missing labels, no hope of ever getting the consumer goods back to the customer. And that doesn't even get into the chemical spills. Adhesive leaking out of boxes onto lots of other boxes. Bleach, that was a big one. It was so bad, the amount of sheer volume of stuff that was getting damaged or destroyed was so bad at UPS, at the warehouse when I was working at one, that Amazon stopped using us, and they just built their own warehouses and started moving their own products. We used to have Amazon SATER accounts to move consumer goods, and the company was so reckless with their products and the goods they're moving for consumers that there's just constant claims all the time for stuff getting damaged out. So Amazon stopped using UPS. There's a lot of companies that have had SATER accounts with UPS and stopped using them because they got tired of their stuff getting broken. Men's Warehouse packages were always getting busted open. I mean, every single day, without fail, every day. And I can tell you, there's so many different instances I could reference, but we had to keep tape and tape guns in our work areas because it was such a high frequency issue to see people's stuff that was busted open that I could literally walk around all night on a bad night taping stuff up, and I would not be able to keep up. Literally all night. I'm not even joking. Some of the customers packed their stuff bad, but most of the time, if something got broken, it was because somebody dropped that box or set something heavy on top of it, or they crushed it between 2 larger packages in the conveyor system.